And the only thing I remember doing was just praying, because at that point the car in front of us was on fire. And just saying, God, we're ready, if that's what you want, just to go ahead and take us home.
I don't think any of us knew the changes that our lives were going to take.
And I kept telling him that his kids need him more now than ever, and that Janet needed him now more than ever, and they had to hold on for them.
When Hannah did come home, realizing at that point that was it, that nobody else was coming home.
This program raises questions. This program is for people who find it hard to trust God. The best answers are wrapped in flesh and blood. My friends, people who are enduring real tragedies every single day. Quadriplegia, muscular dystrophy, stroke, bankruptcy, loneliness, singleness. We're going to talk to those very people who have touched my life. Hi, I'm Joni Erickson Tata. You know, most of us get up every morning and we head into our day relying on routines. We pay the bills, we sort laundry, we balance the checkbook, pick up groceries, put the kids in the van, drop the boys off at soccer, punch a time clock, put in the miles, go through the motions. It's life. It's routine. And anything out of the ordinary, tragedies, accidents, huge life-altering upheavals, well, those things happen to others. You read about their heart-wrenching stories in papers. You see their catastrophes in living color on the nightly news. We shake our heads at their misfortunes, but they're people who live across town, in different cities or countries. They're never us. I guess it's human to think that way, to think that God has pretty much flicked on the cruise control mode on our lives. For the Slaight family, they were living a normal American life in a peaceful Midwestern town.
We had 4 kids, ages 4, 5, 6, and 8. Hannah was in t-ball, basketball, you know, typical stuff. Haley was in preschool. Joe was getting ready to go into preschool that next year, so was Hope.
I worked at UPS at the time, and I worked about 9-10 hours a day, and I was always very happy to get home.
I mean, it was very important for Jim and I, for our family to come first. That's why I was a stay-at-home mom. You know what I mean? Church was definitely the most active thing we were in.
We were really involved in a discipleship group because we both realized that we had never been discipled, and it was through that time that we were both as close to Christ in our life as we'd ever been. And I think part of that was because God was preparing us for the changes that were going to happen in our life.
Isolated by itself, what is a minute? Merely a measurement of time. There are 60 in an hour, 1,440 in a day. As a family, the Slaight's had already lived more than 9 million minutes together. Yet in a mysterious cosmic plan, there was one isolated specific minute. And into those particular 60 seconds was compressed more upheaval than all the minutes marking their lives prior to that instant. The minute I'm referring to occurred on one very normal day.
It started off normal. It was the first day of Jim's vacation. Hope wanted to go swimming, and we're like, no, because we had errands we needed to get done first. So fighting her to get dressed and out of her swimsuit. And then we were heading out to Prairie Camp to get the cabin ready for that week family camp, which is through the missionary church. And we were on our way to that when it happened, when the accident happened. We were heading south on County Road 9 and cresting the hill. And there was a driver coming from the opposite direction heading north on 9 who had crossed the center line at the top of the hill. He was drag racing.
We tried to pull off the side of the road, but the car hit us on the front left corner, and then his car spun around and hit us again on the side. And it was estimated that he was going about 92 miles an hour when he hit us.
I don't remember anything until Jim screaming and swerving, and then a few seconds later waking up at the scene of the accident with Haley crying, asking what happened. I mean, the only thing I remember doing was just praying. because at that point the car in front of us was on fire, and just saying, God, we're ready. If that's what you want, we're ready just to go ahead and take us home.
Jim and I actually went to the same church. We know each other probably about 20 years, I would guess. So, yeah, we're actually accountability partners prior to his accident. So when the call came out, it was dispatched as a pretty run-of-the-mill two-vehicle accident, and that was really about it. As we started going to the call, more and more information came about that one of the vehicles was actually on fire. We had no clue what we were getting into. As we pulled up, I likened it to a war zone. As I looked around, there were seasoned cops and state troopers and other firefighters and paramedics were just, because of the carnage of the whole thing, there were so many people just on their knees, just outright sobbing.
When I was still in the car waiting to be taken out, one of the paramedics I heard say to somebody was standing by because she was performing CPR to stop, that she was gone, let her go, she's gone. And when I looked over, I could see that it was Hope laying on the ground. So I knew at the scene that Hope hadn't made it.
It was actually after I assessed, I was on his third child, when I looked down and realized who the family was. When I recognized Joey and realized what was going on, there was a lot of emotion that hit. And when I stepped in the van and Jim was in the when Jim was in the condition that he was in, it was overwhelming. And all I was trying to do was talk to my friend to keep him here. And I kept telling him that his kids need him more now than ever. And that Janet needed him now more than ever. And they had to hold on for them.
News of the disastrous accident spread like wildfire. It's a small town. Theirs is a close-knit church. And that instant that forever changed the lives of the Slaight family would soon have far-reaching impact within the community.
At the time of their accident, I was a secretary here at Zion Missionary Church. Janet was pretty much one of my very closest friends at the time. And I came into the church and they told me. I basically just fell to the floor and started crying. I just knew that the kids were seriously injured, that Jim they didn't expect him to make it through the night, and one of the children had died. And that was just that was the day.
Although their daughter, Haley, survived pretty much unscathed, it was really different for the others. With a diversity of injuries requiring different specialists, Hannah was sent to one hospital, Joey another, Jim yet a third, and Janet landed in a fourth hospital. One of them was out of state. I cannot imagine a family being so separated at a time like this. But their church body really rallied around them, setting up teams to be with the Slaight's at each hospital in the days following the accident.
When Paul talks about when one part of the body suffers, they all suffer. And I think our whole congregation at the time, they just really banded together and they all reached around and held us through that time.
The biggest thing we organized was making sure that there was always somebody with the kids 24/7. It was very hard because the parents could not be with the kids for quite a while. Janet said, just be with my kids, be with my kids. You know, we want them to be with people they know.
When you hear people say, you know, we don't need to go to church to be a Christian, and they're right, you don't, but why wouldn't you? It's like one of the largest blessings God's given us is the body of Christ, to stand through it with you, to hold you, to walk, to grow, to nurture, to worship. You know, it's like a gift, it's a blessing.
First thing I remember is waking up at the hospital. It's probably the next day, and one of our pastors from our church was there, and the first thing I said to him is, Hope died, right?
Hope was an incredible blend of both Hannah and Haley. She was very strong-willed, but with that strong will came incredible passion at the same time, and nobody can love you like a strong-willed child can.
She'd love to give hugs, and she'd love to have the touch, the loving touch, and she also gave it, and that's was very, very neat about Hope.
In the hospital, they actually let me hold Hope and say goodbye to her while I was waiting to go into surgery, so I had that time to just kind of say goodbye and kind of deal with it a little bit there.
Their darling little girl, Hope, was gone. That meant a funeral. The Slaight family may have been bedridden, in leg and hip casts and hooked up to IVs, but life, or I should say death, goes on. Their daughter was to be buried. There was a funeral to attend.
Because Jim and I were both confined to the bed, I couldn't get up with both of my hips being shattered, and Jim couldn't get up because of his femur and his ankle. So I remember getting dressed in the hospital to get ready to go to the funeral, and then going to the funeral. Jim and I each had to take separate ambulances on the way there.
I sat on that step back there, and I cried. Well, the funeral was beautiful.
You know, there's that part of you that you think, when we get home, things are gonna get normal again. We can get things back again.
I don't think any of us knew the changes that our lives were gonna take. We were just happy to be together.
I was clueless to what it meant to be paralyzed. I mean, just completely clueless to know what that meant, physically, emotionally, you know. I think for us, being told the kids would never walk again, honestly was probably far easier than living with what that really meant and grasping. The not walking is the easiest part of the paralysis. It's everything else that comes with it. The daily challenges is probably the most difficult thing for us to grasp after we realized what that meant.
Somebody told us, aren't you glad your life is normal now? And it was like, it's not normal. I think we have to find a new normal and find out what all that's gonna mean.
Hope was buried, church life returned to normal, and Jim and Janet began to stabilize physically. But with 2 children now in wheelchairs, the Slaight's returned home to a whole new way of life.
I don't think truly the reality of everything set in for a good year after the accident. I think the first thing or the hardest thing to deal with was when Hannah did come home, realizing at that point that was it. Nobody else was coming home. I think that was the first time the whole reality of everything hit in, because up until then we had been separated for so long that I don't think any of us had really dealt with Hope's absence. For us, it wasn't until Hannah came home.
She certainly had the most severe trauma out of any of us, and it was getting used to that. But at the same time, just letting her know that we were happier that she was still here.
I just really respect both my parents for sticking through with this, and I mean, because it's not easy, that's for sure. There's moments where they could have just, said they want to give up, or they didn't want to take care of Joe and I anymore.
I've just admired Hannah. She's been through so much, and she is just a rock. She is just a rock of those children, and that just amazes me, because so many people have become so bitter and so angry and so upset, but she just continuously praises God.
It's like I remember this summer after she had gotten her driver's license and was released, from her care with her physician. She sat out in the car for 2 hours trying to figure out how to tear her chair down and get it in the car and out of the car on her own. Because she's like, I didn't fight this hard to get my driver's license, to sit around and wait for people to take me places or to help me in and out of my car. So for 2 hours in the sun, she sat there, and I sat in the yard watching her do it, crying, thinking, why does it have to be this hard? But on the other hand, so grateful that she was that stubborn and that strong that she wanted to make it work.
You know, the saying, God will never put you through anything you can't handle. So, I mean, that was one thing I have to tell myself over and over, is, you know, God wouldn't do this unless, you know, he knew, well, she's gonna be able to get through this. I'm planning on going to college, you know, getting married and hopefully having kids and stuff like that. And so, I mean, any kind of dream that anybody else would have, that's what I have. I don't see why I can't do it, you know what I mean?
Joe has had to overcome a lot of adversity in his life. He's, for the most part, he's very positive in his outlook. He's real quiet. He loves sports. And more than anything, I think he's just trying to find exactly where his niche can be in those things.
I want to be like a coach for the NFL. I just like sports because I like seeing the cool plays, and yeah, I like the highlight reels on ESPN Sports Center.
He's a typical brother, that's for sure. I like hanging out with him. I mean, there's nothing that, I mean, we can talk about anything. And if he's having a bad day, you know, nobody else really understands it except him and I, so.
Suffering can indeed make people bitter. But how is it that some people can actually find joy, strength, perseverance after a tragedy or disability turns their world upside down? Well, we know that faith is the biggest part of that answer, right? But without question, right near the top of the list is the good old-fashioned remedy, if you will, of a loving, caring, tight-knit family through better or worse, sickness or health. The Slaits are, above all, a family.
People have made comments like, wow, God allowed this to happen to Hannah and Joe because they're such strong individuals and he knew they could deal with it. But on the other hand, I think it takes just as strong of a person to be the sibling of somebody with a disability, because there's a lot of moments of, I'll be with you in a minute when I'm done here. Can you please help Joe get inside? You know, can you please go get that for Hannah, you know? When they leave on a youth trip, you know, Hannah or Haley, just keep an eye out for Hannah, okay? You know, those type of things.
I don't know, we talk about anything, and we can share anything with each other, and you know, she always has my back and I always have hers.
We like to shop, of course, since we're girls, but then we like listening to music and just going places together and having fun. She's a teenage girl. She likes getting on the computer, the phone, texting people.
She struggles, it goes back and forth. There's guilt that she can walk, and she feels guilty that she can walk and they can't. She loves them so much, you know, and wants to be there with them and beside them through it all.
It would be very easy for everyone in that family to be bitter and to be angry and to be very callous and miserable, but they're just not.
I honestly feel that if any family had to go through a crisis as this in our church, that would be the family that could get through it.
It's really easy for people that don't have that firm foundation to lose sight of what's important. But those guys have the secret. They've got the secret of how important it is to hold on to one another. And as long as they have that and they have their faith, everything else is a cakewalk.
And I remember Hannah looking at me and saying, I'm so glad God didn't take you in the accident, Mom, because I really need you. And I went and laid in bed and it was like, Lord, thank you, because I'd much rather hear that from my daughter than have her say to me later, I wish God had taken you because you're so bitter and you're so angry. And I've never wanted my kids to feel that way. And for Jim and I both, our biggest prayer through all of this has been, God, allow this and everything they've been through to draw them closer to you instead of from you.
Joe and I weren't supposed to make it through this at all. None of us were except my mom. And I think that's a miracle in itself. And God's done so many things in my life, that things that I wasn't supposed to be able to do, that I can do.
Colossians 3:17, where it says, whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all for Christ. I think that sums up kind of our challenges that we face day to day.
To always look at the bright side, to be happy, to make the best of things.
Although I hate to see hope gone, but what they have gleaned from that, I mean, they had to pass through that fire to get that spark that they have.
The smiles you see on the faces of each member of the Slaight family, they're not shallow or thin. No, those smiles are hard fought for and literally grounded in the Word of God and in a very high view of Him.
With all of my heart, do I believe that God allowed that to happen that day? Yes, I do. Do I believe that it was in God's plan and His will, and His perfect will? Yes, I do. And I know that's such a hard thing for some people to grasp, you know, even the people I talk to that say, you really believe that a loving God would allow my child to be born with a severe disability? Yeah, I do. I do, just as much as I believe that He allowed both Hannah and Joe to be paralyzed and Hope to be taken that day. I believe that was in His perfect will. He had an enormous purpose for Hope's life. Enormous. And it wasn't done when she died, when she was 4. It wasn't done, it wasn't over.
God's put amazing people in my life that if this would have happened, I never would have met them. And I wouldn't be the person I am today. And I really believe that.
The circumstances of life changed for us. And sometimes those things can be traumatic, but that doesn't change who God is. We just have to continue to trust that He has a plan for us.
For all their incredible trust in God, Jim and Janet Slaight don't actually tell us what they believe to be God's plan or purpose for allowing such a tragedy. They don't talk about reasons. Now, I know that they believe, and I believe, that God's got His reasons, and they are good. But Jim and Janet would be the first to tell you that when your heart is being wrung out like a sponge, an orderly list of the 16 good biblical reasons as to why God allowed something awful, although those reasons are right and true, it can sting like salt in a wound. You know, Dr. Peter Kreeft once said that when a person is suffering, he's very much like a hurting child, looking up into the face of his daddy and asking, why? Now, the child doesn't want answers so much as to have daddy just reach down and pick him up and pat him on the back and say, there, honey, everything's going to be okay. And when we are suffering, that's our plea. We want God to be at the center of things, to be at the center of our suffering. We want to know that He's merciful, that He's kind, that He's compassionate, and that in the end, He will make everything okay. That's our cry. And God, just like a good daddy, is not quick to give answers. He is quick to give Himself. He is not fast with the advice. He is fast to pour out His comfort and His consolation. Because God knows suffering. He knows what it's like to lose a child. And no one, I mean, no one will ever experience the tormenting anguish that God Himself endured when His own Son was taken from justice, beaten bloody, and impaled on a cross. Worse yet, Jesus bore on that cross the crushing weight of every pernicious, unspeakable sin ever committed. And He did it out of love. Love for us and love for His Father. Unlike us, Jesus understood God's plan and purpose for allowing His suffering. He knew the reason. And the reason is written so simply and beautifully in John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave His only Son, that whosoever would believe on Him would have eternal life. Jesus reached down into His awful suffering, and he wrenched out of it something good. His death became our passport from hell to heaven, if we would but believe. And friend, this means your suffering is not pointless. It's not meaningless. As Janet Slaight said, there is a purpose. As we trust Christ, our suffering unites us to Him as nothing else can. Jesus is God's answer. He is the answer. And trust me, you can face anything. Losing a child, sitting in a wheelchair, you can face absolutely anything if you know that the God of the universe is with you in it. What about God's plan and purpose in our suffering? If Jim and Janet were sitting here, I think they would agree. Our suffering has made rock solid our faith, stretched our hope, helped us be grateful, bound us to other believers, and so much more. Being in this wheelchair has meant knowing Him better,